Baby, let me tell you something. I can't leave you alone. Big man, mother. I'm never gonna leave you alone. We stuck together. You my best friend. You my best friend.
It was early morning in Houston, Texas, when a man calmly walked into an apartment complex known as Willow Green. A doorbell camera caught him entering without hesitation. Just a few seconds later, shouting echoed from inside. Then came the gunshots. 9 in total, fast, sharp, and final. Inside that apartment was 32-year-old Jacqueline Wilson, a devoted mother of 4. She had been trying to start over, trying to break free, but now her children would be the ones left to carry the memory of what happened that day. 2 of them were there, awake, and inside the home when their mother was killed. They weren't physically harmed, but what they saw would never leave them. Their mother had been shot multiple times, and by the time help arrived, it was already too late. Only 2 days earlier, the man who pulled the trigger had been released from jail. He had choked her during an argument in the car, and though she survived, the system let him walk free. That morning he came back, and he made sure she wouldn't survive the second time. This is not just the story of a killing. It is the story of a woman who kept trying to live, a mother who gave everything to her children, and a justice system that watched it all collapse. This is the story of Jacqueline Wilson. Jacqueline Wilson's death did not happen in silence. It happened in the middle of warnings, reports, bruises, and pleas. She tried to survive. She tried to leave. She asked for help. And the system let her down at every turn. Her story is a wound that still bleeds through the hearts of her family, her children, and her community. But it is also a mirror, a reflection of how many others are still at risk. Let her name remind us what happens when justice moves too slow and violence moves too fast. Let her story be a reason to act, to speak, and to never assume someone is safe just because they've gone quiet, because silence doesn't mean safety, and love should never end in fear. If stories like this matter to you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep sharing the truth and giving victims, like Jacqueline, the voice they deserved in life.
The streets are calling my name. I'm going to the streets. The streets are calling my name. I'm going to the streets.
Jacqueline Denanicia Wilson was born on January 16, 1992, in the heart of Houston, Texas. From the beginning, her mother, Denise Bibbs, saw in her a light that could never be dimmed. She grew up in a close-knit neighborhood, surrounded by family, faith, and a strong sense of community. She attended Westbury High School, where friends quickly noticed her magnetic presence. People were drawn to her, not just because she was beautiful or funny, but because she had a way of making others feel safe, seen, and understood. Jacqueline, or Jackie as most called her, became the kind of woman who everyone remembered. Her smile lit up rooms. Her laughter could ease tension in the hardest moments. She wasn't loud or boastful, just steady, kind, and full of warmth. She gave more than she took. To neighbors, she was the young woman who always checked in. To friends, she was the listener, the helper, the one you called when your world was falling apart. And to her family, she was a gift. Her compassion was not something she spoke about, it was something she lived. She held people up when they couldn't stand on their own. She showed up for people without being asked, and she never made anyone feel like they owed her anything for her love. It came freely, and it was real. But her proudest role wasn't being a friend, daughter, or community leader. Her greatest joy came from being a mother. She had 4 children, Lance, Aaliyah, Jordan, and Cash. Each one of them knew what it meant to be loved unconditionally. Jacqueline poured everything into motherhood. Her days revolved around school runs, packed lunches, hair brushing, homework, checks, bedtime kisses, and whispered prayers. Even when things were hard, she never let her children feel that weight. She gave them warmth, structure, and a deep sense of being wanted. She created joy, even when her own heart was heavy. Neighbors saw her every morning at the bus stop, checking backpacks and fixing collars, her voice gentle and full of love. The kind of love that builds a foundation for a child's whole life. Jacqueline was a woman who gave everything she had to the people around her. Her strength wasn't in loud speeches or big shows. It was in the quiet, daily sacrifices no one ever saw. And yet, the people who knew her remember those moments most. In a world that too often forgets women like her, Jacqueline stood as a reminder that kindness is power, that love is strength, and that even one woman, standing quietly in her truth, can leave behind a legacy that no gun, no courtroom failure, and no cruel man can ever erase. In 2019, Jacqueline met Howard Devon Ruffin, a man who called himself Hollywood. He was older, 39, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that caught people's attention. He dressed well, spoke smoothly, and had a way of making people laugh. To many, including Jacqueline, he seemed charming and full of potential. He said the right things, showed up when it mattered, and at first made her feel seen in a way that felt new. Jacqueline welcomed the idea of building something stable and meaningful. She believed in love and second chances, and she wanted someone who would care for her the way she cared for everyone else. Her mother, Denise, gave Howard a chance too. She invited him to family gatherings, treated him like a son, and believed he could be a solid presence in Jacqueline's life. In photos and videos, they looked like a happy couple. There were selfies with wide smiles, playful moments shared on social media, and videos where Howard would say things like he could never leave her alone. On the surface, it all looked like love. But behind the filters and carefully chosen captions, cracks were already forming. The signs came quietly at first. Howard started becoming possessive. He wanted to know where Jacqueline was at all times. He questioned her about who she talked to and where she went. He would get angry quickly and wouldn't let small disagreements go. He began isolating her, slowly pulling her away from friends and family. His charm turned into control and his confidence into rage. Still, Jacqueline tried to hold the relationship together. Like many women in abusive situations, she hoped things would get better. She wanted to believe that the man she had once loved could return to being gentle. But the more time passed, the more Howard's behavior darkened. What looked like passion was really power. What seemed like protectiveness was control. He didn't just want Jacqueline by his side, he wanted her completely under him. And though the pictures online still showed smiling faces, the truth was beginning to suffocate her from the inside. Friends started noticing she wasn't herself. She looked tired. She became quieter. Her once vibrant spirit was starting to fade under the weight of trying to love a man who only knew how to harm. What began as a love story was slowly becoming a trap. And even though the world around them didn't see it yet, Jacqueline was already beginning to lose pieces of herself to a man who had no intention of letting her go in peace. As time went on, the violence grew worse. What began with controlling behavior turned into physical assaults that left visible marks. Jacqueline stopped posting as often. Her world started to shrink. In October 2022, the abuse reached a terrifying point. Jacqueline and Howard were driving together when an argument broke out. He didn't just yell, he hit her over and over. He punched her in the face, and when she tried to fight back or defend herself, he used his hands to choke her until she could barely breathe. Trapped in a moving car with nowhere to run, Jacqueline made a desperate decision. She jumped. She opened the door and threw herself from the vehicle while it was still in motion. She landed hard, bruised and shaken, but alive. A passerby saw her and called for help. Police arrived. They saw her injuries. The bruises were deep, and her fear was clear. Officers took her to a hospital, but she refused treatment. She told them she didn't want to press charges, she didn't want to give a full statement, but she did say something that stayed with one of the officers. Quietly, almost like a whisper, she told them, "I'm in trouble." It was the kind of sentence that says everything without explaining anything. The officer requested an emergency protective order on her behalf, but nothing came of it. The system moved slowly, or not at all. The order was never enforced. The warning went unheard. Behind closed doors, Jacqueline was being pulled deeper into a cycle that many victims know too well. Fear, silence, false hope, then more fear. Her family kept pleading with her to leave. Her mother begged her to get away from him, but like so many others, Jacqueline stayed. Whether out of fear, financial pressure, or a quiet belief that maybe he would change, she kept going back. The violence didn't stop. The bruises healed, but the danger never left. Court records later confirmed that Howard had already been convicted of domestic violence in a separate case. He had a history. He had a pattern. But even with that history, and even after this brutal incident in 2022, the justice system did not step in to protect Jacqueline the way it should have. There were no long sentences, no court-mandated monitoring, no emergency measures that stayed in place long enough to keep her safe. Just paperwork, just silence, just time ticking down to the next explosion. By now, her life was no longer her own. She was a mother holding everything together for her children while quietly falling apart in a relationship that was breaking her more and more with each passing day. The system had seen the signs, the courts had the reports, the bruises were there, the cries for help were real. But nothing changed, and because of that, the danger only grew closer. In May of 2023, Howard Ruffin was finally arrested. After years of violent behavior, after police reports, injuries, and court records, it seemed like the justice system had finally caught up with him. The arrest happened in Maverick County, near the Texas-Mexico border. He was taken into custody because of an outstanding warrant linked to the brutal assault on Jacqueline. For a brief moment, it felt like there might be a turning point. Jacqueline's family hoped that this would be the time he stayed behind bars, that someone would take her safety seriously. But that hope didn't last long. Despite everything, despite the evidence of abuse and his violent past, Howard was allowed to post bond. The amount was only $7,500. For a man with multiple assault charges and a pattern of domestic violence, that number was shockingly low. He paid it, walked out, and disappeared again. 16 months went by. During that time, Harris County, the county where the original charges were filed, had no idea he had been released. The court system never received a full update from Maverick County. No alerts were triggered. No special conditions were flagged. There was no active supervision. The man who nearly killed Jacqueline once had simply vanished into a gap between two counties, and no one seemed to notice. This wasn't just a clerical error, it was a deadly failure of communication. Harris County never issued a new warrant. Maverick County never updated their records fully. In a system where everything depends on timing and paperwork, the pieces didn't connect. So Howard kept living freely. No check-ins, no restrictions. And Jacqueline, the woman who had risked everything to report him, was left unprotected again. On September 25, 2024, Howard finally appeared in court in Harris County, but by then it was too late. The judge allowed him to stay free under the same bond he had posted 16 months earlier in another county. Nothing was changed. No additional precautions were added. Despite the history, the warnings, the visible danger, he walked right back out. Just 5 days later, Jacqueline Wilson was dead. Her family could not understand how it had happened, how a man with multiple violent offenses, including abuse against the very woman he killed, had been allowed to walk free again. The answer was as simple as it was heartbreaking. Two counties didn't talk to each other, and no one ever made sure Jacqueline was safe. What should have been a moment of protection became a countdown to tragedy. The bond amount was not just a number, it was a statement. And to Jacqueline's family, it said her life was not worth enough to protect.
Just a few days before the incident.
The only one time that I heard him, and I want to say within the last week, is when he says, "Okay, I'm going to kill you."
On the morning of October 3rd, 2024, Jacqueline Wilson woke up like any other day in her apartment at Willow Green in northwest Houston. The children were getting ready for school. It was a normal Thursday, until it wasn't. At exactly 8 a.m., a camera at her front door recorded a man walking into the apartment. It was Howard Ruffin. He had been released from jail just 2 days earlier. Only seconds after he stepped inside, the silence broke. A loud argument began. From outside, neighbors later said they heard raised voices. Surveillance audio captured the noise, fast, frantic, and then something sharper. In less than half a minute, 9 gunshots rang out through the small home. The sound was terrifying. Then came a scream, then silence. Howard walked out of the apartment moments later. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He left the way he came in, calm, as if nothing had happened. But inside that apartment, Jacqueline Wilson was lying on the floor. She had been shot several times. She wasn't breathing. 2 of her children, just 4 and 7 years old, were inside the apartment when it happened. They saw their mother after the shooting. They saw the blood. They saw the body. Still dressed for school, the 2 children ran outside, hoping for help. They sprinted toward the nearby bus stop, crying and panicked. 2 women standing nearby assumed they were running late for the bus. But then the words came. Small voices trying to explain something too big for children to carry. The women froze. Then they ran toward the apartment, unsure of what they were about to see. When they entered Jacqueline's home, the scene was beyond anything they had imagined. The mother of 4 lay lifeless on the ground. The children had told the truth. One of the women called 911. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, but it was already too late. Jacqueline was gone. When the officers called her mother, Denise, to tell her what had happened, her first question was not about what happened or when. It was a name. She asked if Howard Ruffin had killed her daughter. There was no hesitation, no doubt. She already knew. In the days that followed, neighbors shared what they had heard in the weeks leading up to the shooting. One person remembered hearing Howard shout a threat just days before. "I'm going to kill you." No one thought he meant it. Now they knew he did. The trauma left behind didn't end with Jacqueline's death. It continued in the eyes of the children who saw it. It lived in the silence that followed the gunshots, in the faces of the neighbors who had to carry what they witnessed, and in the arms of a mother who would never again hold her daughter. The news of Jacqueline Wilson's death spread quickly through Houston. It didn't feel like just another crime. It felt like something that could have been stopped. Her family was devastated. Her community was heartbroken. And the outrage began almost immediately. People couldn't understand how a man with a violent history had been allowed to walk free. The bond amount, the missed warnings, the ignored court records, it all felt like failure stacked on failure. Jacqueline's mother, Denise, stepped forward and spoke to the press. Through tears, she made it clear that her daughter's death was not just the result of one man's cruelty, it was also the result of a system that refused to protect her. She held nothing back. She blamed the judge, who kept the bond low. She blamed the counties that didn't communicate. And she made sure everyone knew that this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a preventable one. Vigils were held in Jacqueline's name. Friends lit candles. Community leaders called for justice reform. Survivors of domestic violence shared their own stories, connecting Jacqueline's case to a wider pattern of silence and neglect. Advocacy groups issued public statements, pointing to Jacqueline's story as another example of why more protections were needed, especially for women trying to leave dangerous partners. Meanwhile, Howard Ruffin was not hiding. A few days after the killing, he turned himself in to authorities. He was booked into the Harris County Jail and charged with murder. This time, no bond was set. He would not walk free again. But for Jacqueline's family, justice had come too late. They had already lost her. Her children had already watched their lives fall apart in one violent moment. The court system was finally moving, but the cost of its delay could never be undone. In the eyes of those who loved her, Jacqueline's death was not just a personal loss. It was a public warning. It was a cry for accountability. It was a demand to change the way things work, so that no more mothers would be left unprotected and no more children would be left to live with the memory of what they had seen. Jacqueline Wilson did not die because she made one bad choice. She did not die because she stayed too long or loved too hard. She died because the systems meant to protect her failed at every level. Her warnings were not enough. Her injuries were not enough. Her fear, her silence, her courage, none of. It moved the system fast enough to stop what everyone saw coming. The courts had his record. The police had the reports. The judges had the power. And still, Jacqueline was left unprotected. Her story is not rare. Across the country, victims of domestic violence face the same silence, the same delays, the same deadly gaps between laws and action. Too many people are hurt or killed while waiting for help that never comes. And too often their names are only remembered after it's already too late. What happened to Jacqueline Wilson should not be forgotten. It should be a turning point, a call to listen sooner, to act faster, to believe women when they say they are not safe. Because silence is not just a response, it's a sentence. In the wake of her death, Jacqueline's family has stepped forward to raise her children and carry her legacy. A GoFundMe was launched to support the 4 young lives she left behind. Strangers and friends alike have joined together to offer love, money, and strength in her absence. But the truth is, no donation can fill the space she once held. Her absence is permanent, her voice is gone, but her story must speak louder than ever. Those who hear this story have a choice. They can look away, or they can do something. They can support shelters, they can call out warning signs, they can check in on the quiet friend, they can raise their voices for change, because behind every news headline is a real life, a real mother, a real family. And behind every delayed court file is someone like Jacqueline, holding on just a little longer, hoping the system will come through. This time, it didn't. But maybe next time, it will. Jacqueline Wilson's death did not happen in silence. It happened in the middle of warnings, reports, bruises, and pleas. She tried to survive. She tried to leave. She asked for help. And the system let her down at every turn. Her story is a wound that still bleeds through the hearts of her family, her children, and her community. But it is also a mirror, a reflection of how many others are still at risk. Let her name remind us what happens when justice moves too slow and violence moves too fast. Let her story be a reason to act, to speak, and to never assume someone is safe just because they've gone quiet. Because silence doesn't mean safety, and love should never end in fear.